Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're tackling something super important for museums and, well, for all of us who love history and art. We're talking about the fight against biodeterioration.
It's definitely a crucial area, where science and art really have to work together.
So before we get into how museums handle this, can we just start with the basics? Like, what exactly is biodeterioration?
Biodeterioration. It's basically any change in a material that's caused by living organisms, and it's not a good change, it's damage.
Okay, so is that like when you have fruit going bad just sitting on your counter?
It is similar, but we usually call that biodegradation, decomposition, things like that. They're usually, beneficial processes in the grand scheme of things. But biodeterioration is specifically when these organisms have a negative impact.
Gotcha. So it's like the bad kind of breakdown. What kind of organisms are we even talking about here?
It's a whole range, really. You've got the tiny stuff like bacteria and fungi, but then you've also got bigger problems like insects, rodents, sometimes even birds get in on the action.
Wow, so it's a lot. And what about the types of damage? Is it always, something really obvious, like an insect chewing right through a painting?
Not always, no. There are a few different ways biodeterioration can happen. Let's see, we can think about it in three main categories: physical or mechanical, then there's fouling, and then there's the chemical or assimilatory kind.
Okay, let's break those down a bit. Which one is like the easiest to wrap your head around?
Physical biodeterioration is probably the most straightforward. It's the direct damage from what the organism is doing.
So think like a mouse gnawing on a sculpture.
Exactly. Or, insects getting into textiles and burrowing through them. Anything where they are physically changing the material, really.
Right, that makes sense. What about fouling? Does that have anything to do with like seagulls?
Not exactly, no. Although birds can definitely be part of the problem sometimes. Fouling is more about what the organisms leave behind, things that mess up how the material looks.
So it's not really about the object breaking down, but it's still like ruins it.
Yeah, precisely. Think about bird droppings on a statue. Or have you ever seen those little black spots on old books? That's actually usually fungal colonies.
Oh, that's gross.
Yeah.
So even if they're not actively eating the object, just being there is enough to cause a problem.
And sometimes fouling can lead to even more deterioration. For instance, those biofilms, those kind of slimy layers of microorganisms, they can trap moisture and dirt, and then that creates a perfect environment for other more destructive organisms.
Okay, on to the last one. Chemical or assimilatory biodeterioration. That one sounds a bit more complicated.
It is a bit. It's where organisms actually break down the material like on a chemical level. They're
Yeah.
basically using it as food.
Wait, so they're eating the art?
Well, in a way, yeah. Some microorganisms can metabolize things that we wouldn't normally think of as food, like stone, even plastics, sometimes even metal.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So we've got this whole invisible army of organisms out there just like slowly trying to eat away at our history. What can we even do to stop them?
Well, that's where integrated pest management comes in, or IPM, as it's usually called.
Right, right. I've heard of that. Can you explain exactly what it is?
So IPM is basically, it's a way to manage pests, but in a way that is, comprehensive and proactive. It's about preventing the problem before it even starts.
So it's less about like swatting flies and more about building a fortress to keep them out.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. You have to understand like who the enemy is, find those weak spots, and then come up with a plan to defend against them.
Okay, so what are some of the things that go into building this fortress?
Well, first and foremost, you have to know what you're dealing with. Museums will do regular inspections, of their collections and the building itself, just looking for any signs of pest activity.
So they're actively looking for trouble before it becomes a disaster.
Exactly. And they also keep an eye on things like temperature and humidity because, those can make a space more attractive to pests.
Makes sense.
What else? Identifying vulnerable items is really important too. Museums will go through their collections and figure out which objects are most likely to get damaged by pests, and then they prioritize those.
So it's like a triage situation,
Yeah.
figuring out what needs the most attention.
You could say that, yeah. And once they know what items are most vulnerable, then they can start thinking about modifying the environment.
Like what? Just cranking the AC up really high?
Well, it can include climate control, yeah. A lot of times museums try to keep a stable temperature and humidity because that makes it harder for pests to survive.
So making it uncomfortable for any unwanted guests.
Exactly. But it's not just the climate. It's also about taking away those food sources, making
Wow.
sure there's no water lying around. Housekeeping is a big part of it. Cleaning regularly, removing dust and debris, anything organic that could attract pests.
So basically, making the museum the least appealing place possible for anything that might want to, you know, nibble on the art. What else?
Well, access control is another really important
That's
part
it.
of it.
Like velvet ropes, but for bugs.
Kind of, yeah. It's about actually preventing pests from even getting inside the building. So that means sealing up cracks, putting screens on the windows and vents, making sure all the doors close tightly.
Okay, so we've got surveillance, we've got the climate under control, we've got this super sealed building. What if, like, even with all that, a pest still gets in?
Then it's time to look at treatment options. But even then, IPM is all about using the least toxic option and being as careful as possible.
So you're not just grabbing the strongest pesticide and spraying everything.
No, not at all. Whenever possible, you want to use non-chemical options first.
Like what? Fly swatters and mousetraps?
We'll get into some of those specific treatment options in a bit, but I think it's interesting to talk about stone for a second. Most people think of stone as, super durable, but actually it's susceptible to biodeterioration too.
Really? Stone, I mean, it just seems so, I don't know, permanent.
Yeah, it does, but certain types of stone, especially marble and limestone, they can be attacked by microorganisms.
I'm guessing it has something to do with, like, acids?
You got it. Some bacteria produce acid as part of their, metabolism, and those acids can actually slowly dissolve the stone.
So these tiny little organisms are, like, eating away at something as solid as stone. That's wild. Anything else that causes problems with stone?
Well, there's always a debate about lichens.
Lichens, aren't those those colorful patches you see growing on rocks and trees?
Exactly. They're this symbiotic organism, a combination of fungi and algae, and their impact on stone is actually a bit of a mystery.
So are they good guys or bad guys?
It's hard to say, really. Some studies show they can damage stone, but there's also evidence that they can actually protect the stone in some situations.
So like double agents in the biodeterioration world.
Uh-huh. Yeah, kind of. It seems like their impact really depends on a lot of different factors, what type of stone it is, what species of lichen, even the environment around it.
Okay, so still a lot we don't know about lichens. But let's get back to those treatment options you mentioned earlier. What happens when those preventative measures don't work and a museum actually has to deal with an infestation? So let's say all that stuff you mentioned, like the preventative stuff, let's say it all fails and now we got an infestation, like it's actually happening. What then? Do they just like grab the bug spray?
Oh, no, not at all. Remember, with IPM, the goal is to do as little as possible. And when you do have to do something, you want to use the least toxic methods you can.
Okay, so what are some of those gentler options?
One that's pretty common is controlled freezing.
Freezing. Wait, like you can like a painting in the freezer?
Well, yeah, basically, you can put objects or even a whole small collection into a controlled freezing environment, and that kills the pests, at all the life stages. Eggs, larvae, the adults, everything.
So it's like hitting the reset button on the whole infestation. Yeah. Are there any other options that don't involve chemicals?
Yeah. Another good one is controlled atmosphere treatment.
Okay, that one sounds kind of interesting. Tell me more.
So with that one, you're basically changing the atmosphere inside a sealed chamber, and you're making it so that, the pests can't survive. Usually you do that by lowering the oxygen level, and sometimes you add in other gases like nitrogen or carbon dioxide.
So you're suffocating them.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's a good option because, it doesn't use any harsh chemicals, so you can use it on more delicate items, things that are more sensitive.
I know we can't avoid chemicals completely when it comes to, dealing with pests, but IPM is all about using them only when you absolutely have to, right?
Exactly. If you've tried everything else and you've still got a really bad infestation, then you might have to use chemicals. But even then, you want to use the least toxic option you can, and you apply it in a very controlled way. You want to minimize any harm to the object itself and, of course, to the people who are handling it.
So it's not a decision you make lightly. It makes you realize that pest management in a museum is way more complicated than just, like, setting out some traps.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You really have to understand both sides of the equation, You have to understand the pests, but you also have to know about the objects you're trying to protect.
So, like, if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, hey, I want to be, like, an art-saving pest warrior, what kind of background do you need for that?
It's a really cool field. Usually people come to it from, a background in museum studies or conservation or sometimes entomology, which is the study of insects.
Makes sense. You got to know the art, you got to know the enemy. Speaking of enemies, are there any specific types of collections that are like really vulnerable to these little art munchers?
Oh, for sure. Natural history collections and ethnographic collections, those are really attractive to insects a lot of the time.
I can see why. They use a lot of organic materials, right? Like
Yeah.
wood, fur, feathers, stuff like that.
Exactly. Those are basically a feast for certain types of pests. Textile collections and archival collections, those are pretty high risk too, because they often have things like wool, silk, paper, the things that some pests just love to munch on.
So those collections need like an extra level of protection.
Yeah,
It makes you realize that IPM isn't just a nice thing to have for museums. It's like absolutely crucial.
it really is. It's essential for keeping our cultural heritage safe, making sure it's around for future generations.
Okay, so let's say a museum is like starting from scratch with their IPM program.
Yeah.
Where do they even begin?
Well, the first thing you got to do is figure out what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You need a good assessment of the museum's pest situation. What pests are there, where are they concentrated, and what materials are most at risk.
So it's kind of like a pest census.
Yeah, exactly. And the best way to do that is through monitoring.
Okay, what does that look like? Like, do they have security cameras for bugs?
Haha, not quite. But there are some pretty cool tools out there. You've got different types of traps, sticky traps, pheromone traps. Those are designed to attract specific types of insects.
So you're not just trying to catch anything that moves, you're being strategic about it.
Right. And if you place those traps carefully, throughout the museum, you can start to build up a picture of what's going on.
I'm guessing this monitoring also helps you find those weak spots in the building, like where the pests are getting in.
Yep, exactly. You can track where the pests are showing up, and that helps you pinpoint those vulnerabilities. Cracks, gaps, doors, and windows that aren't sealed properly, things like that.
So you're using the data to make the museum more secure.
Exactly. Data is super important for a successful IPM program. You can't just set out some traps and see what happens. You have to keep really good records of what you're catching, where you're catching it, and when.
So it's like building this whole database of pest activity.
Exactly. And that data tells you a lot. You can see trends over time, you can see where the problems are, and then you can tailor your strategy to address those specific issues.
It's like having a pest intelligence unit.
Pretty much, yeah. And these days there's even software specifically for museums, to help them manage all that IPM data.
So technology is helping in the fight against biodeterioration. That's great.
Oh, it's a huge help. These programs can track all the pest activity, generate reports, even send you alerts. If things are getting out of control, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it.
So we've talked about monitoring and data, but I'm guessing that education and training are a big part of this too, right?
Absolutely. For an IPM program to really work, everyone in the museum has to be on board.
So everyone from the director to the volunteers needs to understand, like, how to protect the collection.
Right. And that means educating them about the common pests, the signs of an infestation, and what they can do to prevent problems. It could be workshops, online resources, even just simple reminders and posters around the museum.
And it shouldn't just be for staff, right? Visitors need to understand this too.
Definitely. A lot of times, visitors don't realize that, something like bringing in food or drinks could actually contribute to a pest problem, or that their coats and bags could be carrying hitchhikers.
So it's about creating this culture of awareness, making sure everyone feels responsible for protecting the collection.
Exactly. That's a huge part of any successful IPM program.
This has all been really fascinating. It makes you realize how much work goes into keeping the art and artifacts we love safe.
It's a constant battle, but it's so important. We have to protect this stuff for future generations.
Speaking of the future, what are some of the things that you're most excited about in this field? Any new technologies or strategies that seem really promising? Yeah, it's amazing to think about all the innovation that's happening in museums, behind the scenes. What are some of the things that you're like most excited about when you think about the future of this field?
Oh, there are so many cool things happening. One area that's really promising is it's what we call smart museum environments.
Smart environments.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty futuristic. What does that even mean?
So imagine sensors all over the museum, right?
Hmm.
And they're constantly monitoring everything. Temperature, humidity, light levels, all those things we've been talking about that can cause problems.
So it's like giving the building itself a way to like sense those changes, the ones that we might not even notice.
Exactly. And the best part is these sensors can actually trigger like automatic responses.
Yeah.
So let's say the humidity starts going up in one of the galleries. The system could automatically adjust the climate control to bring it back down.
Wow, so the museum could practically take care of itself. That's amazing. What about treatments? Are there any like new technologies coming out that are, better at getting rid of pests, like more targeted, less invasive, that sort of thing?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of really interesting research happening right now. For example, they're doing some really cool stuff with lasers.
Lasers?
Yeah, they can use lasers to like target and kill pests really precisely. So you could, zap a tiny little insect without harming the artwork it's sitting on.
That sounds like something out of like a sci-fi movie. Anything else that's on the cutting edge?
Another area that's really cool is it's using bio-based solutions. So that's basically using beneficial microorganisms to, fight against the harmful ones.
So it's like fighting fire with fire, but on a microscopic level.
Exactly. It's like having this tiny little army of good microbes that can outcompete the bad guys or even like prey on them.
That's amazing. It makes you wonder, like, what will museums even look like in the future? Will they be these like high-tech fortresses, protecting all these amazing objects from this army of like invisible invaders?
Maybe, but I think the best museums will always find that balance, between using the latest technology and also having those really skilled conservators. Because you need people who can look at each object, understand its needs, interpret all that data we were talking about, and make the right decisions. It's about combining the best of technology with, human expertise and artistry.
That's a great point. It's not just about having the fanciest gadgets. Uh, it's about knowing how to use them the right way.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a fascinating look into biodeterioration and all the amazing ways that museums are, working to protect our history.
It's an important fight, that's for sure.
And a huge thank you to you for taking the time to talk with us and share your expertise.
Well, it's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new and interesting, and maybe even maybe it got you thinking about how you can help protect the art and history all around us. So until next time, stay curious.